welcome to Served Up. This podcast is where hospitality meets leadership and where we take an honest look at the business of beverage. I'm Bridget Albert. I've spent my career building cocktail programs, mentoring rising talent, judging competitions, and advocating for women in our industry. I'm joined by my co-host, Eric Heemer, one of only 5 people in the world to hold both the Master Sommelier and Master of Wine titles. His depth of knowledge and global perspective brings tremendous insight to every conversation. This is Served Up. Hey, y'all, it's Bridget here. Please join me in welcoming Geoff Whitman, a man who has mastered the rare art of living 2 extraordinary lives with equal passion. By day, Geoff is a respected leader in the wine industry, helping to shape the vision and success of Lloyd Cellars, where a commitment of craftsmanship, storytelling, and hospitality defines every single bottle. By night, and often somewhere between soundcheck and encore, he transforms into an official tour photographer for Pearl Jam, capturing the emotion, energy, and humanity of one of the most iconic rock bands. After decades as a devoted fan and accomplished photographer, Geoff's journey has become full circle, documenting the band's Dark Matter tour through the lens that only someone with genuine love for the music could provide. His work has culminated in a stunning official photo book, React, Respond, offering fans an intimate look at the life on and off the stage. Now, what makes Geoff's story so compelling is that it reminds us great careers don't have to fit in one box. Whether he's introducing someone to a beautifully crafted Chardonnay or preserving a once-in-a-lifetime concert moment, his work is rooted in the same philosophy: authenticity, creativity, and connection. He understands that both wine and music have a remarkable ability to bring people together, creating lasting memories and tell stories that stay with us long after the last note fades or that last sip is enjoyed. As someone who has spent a career championing the intersection of wine hospitality and unforgettable experiences, I can't think of a more inspiring guest to share how passion, persistence, and artistry can create a life that's every bit as extraordinary as the moment he captures. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite Lloyd Cellars wine, and let's just enjoy together this very special Served Up episode. Geoff, welcome to Served Up. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
You got it.
So, Geoff, tell us a little bit about your background, first and foremost, while we get started. Where are you from? Where'd you
Yeah.
grow up?
I feel like I've told this story a lot being in the wine business for so long, because just people always want to know what's up. But I'm from upstate New York originally, moved to the Boston area when I was a kid and kind of grew up in Boston, college in Boston, consider Boston home, no disrespect to New York by any means, but I became a Red Sox fan immediately upon arriving in the Boston area. So that stuck with me and lived in Boston until the early to mid 90s. I headed off to followed a girl to Santa Barbara and found myself, working in restaurants to survive as I did through college and ended up in the wine business, really. I mean, that's about as straightforward as it gets. I started off working in production at Au Bon Climat for the great Jim Clendenin, may he rest in peace. So he was my first boss, and he's the guy who actually told me, maybe you should go to work for Southern and learn how to sell it because it's the hardest part. And sure enough, he was right. It's the hardest part. And here I am still doing the hardest part for whatever reason. But yeah, so
Yeah, that's
that's in
great.
a nutshell.
Yeah, Jim was a wonderful fellow, and we all miss him. I'll fondly remember visiting Au Bon Climat on several occasions. He was a great guy. He's still definitely missed by the wine world. So you worked for
Yeah.
Southern for a few years I know in this Southern California market. What did you do? Were you on premise, off premise? Who'd you call on?
So I started out, as so many of us do, getting hired into the chain division. And then very quickly, the chain division role was I guess the team was changing. So they said, hey, we have this great opportunity in the convenience division, which I thought was super convenient, no pun intended. But I was living in Santa Barbara and my territory was 7-Elevens and a handful of Circle Ks that sold spirits from Santa Barbara to Westlake Village. And probably not a story for a podcast, but had a reason to all of a sudden want to interview for a position down in Los Angeles, which was kind of my goal all along, would be to head down to LA, and ended up getting a job selling fine wine to mainly on premise, had a handful of off premise accounts, but Beverly Hills, Hollywood. And that was 97, I think, 96, 97. And so I moved down to LA and did that for a couple of years, and then pretty quickly made the decision to turn supplier and, turned supplier and went to a small vodka company called Pearl Vodka, which was brand new at the time.
Oh, yes.
And then on from there, got recommended for a position with Robert Mondavi, which to me was like getting the call from the Red Sox. So that was a good day.
And that was still when it was owned by the Robert Mondavi family at the time.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm still tight and still friends with all of them, from Michael and Tim and Marcy down to the grandkids and now the great grandkids, which is crazy. So
Yeah,
Wow.
it's great.
yeah,
So, which came first, a passion for photography or a passion for Pearl Jam? Or were they
yeah,
sort of simultaneous?
great question. Photography came first. Pearl Jam didn't exist when I first became interested in photography. I have a visual artist mom. She was into painting and serigraph, screen print stuff, pretty technical stuff. And so I was, as a child, going down to New York City to gallery shows that she was either in or that she was part of or that she wanted to visit. Met lots of crazy, interesting people, as you would imagine, in New York City in the late 70s. Even as a kid, I think I was aware of how crazy and interesting these folks were. But part of the deal when my parents split up was we would go to a new city or to New York, and we would go to an art museum during the day, and that allowed me to get to a baseball game at night. So I would say that my love of photography came out of that and really out of my love of baseball. So here you go. It's the whole package. But I remember seeing at the MoMA in New York an exhibit of Robert Frank, and I've been obsessed with Robert Frank ever since. And then through his work with the Stones in the early 70s on I believe the same tour Jim Marshall was on, I got acquainted with Jim Marshall, and just something about high contrast black and white became a thing. And then, jumped to being a college kid in Boston, in the early 90s when the sort of the grunge movement was exploding. I happened upon a Pearl Jam show after only hearing one song on the radio back when we listened to the radio. I happened upon a show by way of picking up a shift at a bar I was bar backing at, and got to catch them live before really anybody knew who they were. So I've been
Wow.
obsessed with them since then, obsessed with photography since then. And so cut to 35 years later, here I am, their tour photographer with a book, and living this like dream life, which I couldn't have ever imagined then. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Just
yeah.
amazing. So, being a Boston guy, you must have a fond spot for Aerosmith as well, I imagine.
Oh my gosh, do I ever? Pro-
Me too.
pro- do you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
all 3 of us.
not my first show, but up there, I would say. I mean, they were in rough shape around 1983. I would say they were in the ruts, if you're going to
Yeah,
coin an Aerosmith term. So, and I didn't get to see them, I don't think, until 85, done with Mirrors.
yeah, that was a comeback
And,
album.
what's really weird is through living in Boston, and first of all, I went to high school in New Hampshire. And so I remember riding to school with one of my mom's friends, had a daughter who was a senior, and I was like a freshman in high school. And she was, good looking, and I would not say a word. I would just sit there in the car, being high school freshman. And she played a lot of Aerosmith and Foghat and stuff. So she's a rock chick, so I was definitely interested even more so. And she said, yeah, they all got together at Lake Sunapee, which is right around the corner from where I went to high school, and I couldn't believe it. Like, you could have knocked me over with a fucking feather. I mean, that was
Wow.
it. And so that way you become even more, interested, right? Because those guys are from here. Like you could be from here and do that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love Aerosmith. First show I ever shot was Aerosmith, a warm up show for I think it was the Pump tour.
Oh,
And
I saw that tour.
did you? Yeah,
Yeah, I have the
unreal.
album. You remember
They
here? Yeah, love that.
they warmed up at a place called the Rat in Boston, which is no longer there. And I have a crazy story about years later, and I'm looking off camera over here, but I have a picture of myself with Steven and Joe wearing a Rat t-shirt, and
I
that
saw
got
them
me a lot
too.
of mileage with those guys. I mean, they
Yeah.
they were like, "What? You were there?" Like, I can't believe it. It was so cool. But yeah, they're like longtime favorite of mine. Guilty pleasure, Aerosmith. I love them so much
Oh,
Yeah.
still.
yeah. Me too.
Well,
Timeless.
that's an amazing story. Jeff, your evolution from passionate fan to official photographer for Pearl Jam just feels like a rock and roll dream.
Mm.
When you first started shooting shows in 2006, did you ever imagine this level of intimacy with the band?
No, never. And like what you imagine what it would be like, and then when you actually live it, it's even better. It's like it's so weird. The whole "don't meet your heroes" thing. It definitely extends to rock and roll. I met so many people in rock and roll from like the most notable of recent would be the legendary Peter Frampton. He came out with the band in Nashville, and I get to say hi to him while he was like checking
Wow.
out the amps and stuff, and it was like he was just lovely. It was like a lovely guy. But so the theory of "don't meet your heroes" kind of has gone out the window with me. I've met so many of them, and so many of them are cool.
Mhm.
But no, I never ever would have guessed, or never would have imagined.
Yeah.
It just is. It's crazy. The first night in Boston, that first show, I met kind of happenstance met Jeff Ament and Eddie Vedder at this club. But again, they weren't like you didn't even really. I didn't know what they looked like until they took the stage. So I was hanging outside smoking a cigarette with some of the crew guys, as barbacks and bartenders often do, or
Mhm.
did, at least in the '90s. And they were just out there. I remember Jeff was like talking about skateboarding with one of the Lemonheads guys, and I was like, "This is banana." These guys are cool. They're not that much older than me. It's like this is a thing. I didn't know this happened here, right behind my apartment. And so I've got to kind of retell that story to both of those guys, and Ed's great. He's like, "That was you?" I'm like, "You don't remember that?" He's like, "No, I don't remember
I don't
that."
remember
But
that.
yeah, he definitely doesn't remember. He remembers me now, but yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, now that you've documented the Dark Matter tour in your book, Pearl Jam React Respond, what's it like standing just feet away from such iconic artists and translating that raw energy into a still image?
That's a solid question, Bridget. Great question, because photography is the thing I love about it is you're taking a page out of time. That's never going to happen again.
Mhm.
And shooting shows across, 50 something shows on this tour, you kind of know when you can see when things are shaping up to happen, like an interaction with the crowd or with each other, or something's going on. So you kind of want to be in the right spot. But I got a really good firsthand lesson, I think, in show business. And that is that every one of us are there to put on that show, and it's my job is just to document it and sort of capture the moment. And the whole idea with this book is I'm going to shoot it from a fan's perspective because I still am one,
Mhm.
but I'm also going to get, on stage and behind the amps and shoot, these guys in their space, in their moments. And it takes a bit of time and a bit of trust to get there. And same thing, if you had told me that I would have one day have that trust, I wouldn't have believed it because it just was I've always been obsessed with what the roadies are doing. Any show I've ever been to, I'm always watching the roadies. What does that guy do? And like to see, my friend Kevin Schiss, the great Kevin Schiss, who's the Pearl Jam archivist, he'll walk out like almost showtime. And I kind of know it's go time, showtime, because he'll walk out with, two bass guitars in his hands. And like, it's like I'm always was obsessed with what are each one of these people doing. And now I'm one of those people. And it's kind of
That's wild.
crazy. And talk about a good seat, I mean, there's no better seat than that. So,
Right, right. And you mentioned like, that trust, it has to exist, right? It has to exist between the artist and the photographer because what you're doing is incredibly intimate, capturing the music and that still image. And
Yes.
so, how did you earn that access, right? And how does it influence the way you shoot?
Yeah, I mean, I think great responsibility comes with that access, and that's something that isn't taught. There's no
Yeah.
course you can take, in photography school to say, what would happen if I were a band photographer and all of a sudden I found myself in this situation? It doesn't happen, right? So you just have to have, for one, I think you have to have taste and you have to have good sense. Number two, look, this is not a gig I'm ready to give up ever.
No.
So, and I think you could easily give it up by doing something dumb. And, I mean, we know in any business, people do dumb things all the time. And so, you kind of like, I keep my wits about me, keep my head on straight. I know what I'm there to do. The show's not about me. And how do we get that access? It developed over time, I would say the first leg of the tour, it was kind of like, well, you'll get up on stage eventually. You'll kind of get a feel for when you can get up on stage.
Mhm.
And, everybody wants to get on stage. And to me, it was more like just being able to do that and do my job. But then you feel the drums and you feel the bass in your chest. And it's like, it's crazy. I mean, it's hard to imagine it's better than being in the front row, but it is, because you're actually seeing it happen in real time and you're shooting it. So I think it just happens over time, and there was no, like, the band didn't call me in and say, "Okay, now you can do this." It's
Mm.
just like, quick kinda hello, check in with the security, the band security guys or the tour manager and say, "Hey, I'd like to get up and get a couple." "Yeah, go ahead." And then it was like, "Okay, now it's every night. Now I know to go up when the house lights are up, so I'm not silhouetting against all this beautiful imagery behind that." It's like you start to
Mhm.
learn in real time. And even up to the last night of that tour in Pittsburgh, which is now almost a year, geez, I think it's a year ago this week, it still would just give you a thrill of a lifetime, to be up there. And then it's like, by that time you're getting nods and waves from some of the guys and it just was dream come true stuff. It's like the sort of the thought or the look like we all pulled this off. Like we did this. This was a world tour. We did this. And you were there with us. So it was cool.
It's
That is
incredible.
yeah, that is really cool. So, as opposed to a photographer who is dispassionate or somewhat dispassionate about the subject, you're a true Pearl Jam fan. So, how do you balance that emotional connection that you have with the band with the discipline and objectivity that you need to capture the perfect shot? How do you handle that emotion
uh,
there?
I have to turn that part of me off a little bit. Like the part of me that, I mean, the super fan part of me and my great friend Tim Bierman, who works for the band, he's like been my buddy for a long, long time. I don't know, almost 20 years. I remember he brought me around HQ one time, the first time, and I got to see like all the cool stuff and all the gear and this is years ago. And he introduced me to a couple of the guys downstairs who I now know are techs, the most talented freaking crew in rock and roll. And the techs are like probably some of the best musicians you'll ever meet. And and he introduced me to them and he goes, "Jeff's a super fan. He just doesn't act like it." And like eh, inside, I'm freaking out.
Right.
Inside, I'm having like this out of body moment. And
That's
it
amazing.
I mean, it happens all the time. It's like it happened to me in Sydney, with the conversation I was having with Charles from the Pixies. And it's like, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with you. You're the reason I listen to and fucking love music. I mean, it really like they're the influence over everybody. And he's just like, yeah, why not? Why not come up on stage and shoot? We've never had a photographer shoot us from the stage, but why not you? I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
I almost had a heart attack. And I mean, it took countless conversations that I've had with the other guys. Mike McCready telling me in a record store in Baltimore, I ran into him randomly. Are you with us the whole time? I'm like, I'm going to be with you the whole time, Mike. Meanwhile, I've been on like 10 shows already. And he goes, oh, I'll start posing for you now. And I was like, you're not posing for me yet? Like, you're amazing. He's such a lead guitar player. I mean, he's got all the moves and the looks and like just no, I mean, shreds, he's melting faces. So It just was like, it's just bizarre. So I have to turn that bit of me off. Although I'll tell you, when I'm in the crowd, muscle memory, your body is there in the crowd. You're shoulder to shoulder to people. People are spilling drinks on you and sweating on you. I have thousands of dollars in camera gear hanging off me, and I'm singing. You know, I can't help it, and, like, I love it. I still love it. That music, is I mean, Pearl Jam at the forefront of it just changed my life. I mean, those guys
Yeah,
were talking to us. For the first time, somebody was talking to us,
Yeah,
you're
and
right.
and
You're
that blew
right.
my mind.
it's amazing. So there's such a sensory overlap between music and wine. Do you find that your creative eye as a photographer informs the way you approach building a wine brand? We had to get into the wine here sooner or later, so
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, let's get into it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it all again, not to be punny, but I think, things develop, they really do. It's like when you're walking vineyards at 4 o'clock in the morning, with a friend who's made wine for 100 years, damn close to 100 years, the great Tony Coltrane, who's worked with the Mondavi family forever. And I'm godfather to his son, and he's godfather to one of the Mondavi, or to Rob Mondavi's son. And it's this whole awesome connection. But, he said to me one time, and it reminds me of things that Jim used to say to me, outside of "Get the fuck out of that barrel." That's not, stop sticking that thing in that barrel. You don't need to taste that wine again. But, Tony would say things like, "Wine is a reflection of how much you care." And it's like, we would always be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." But no, you have to care about all of it. And so, like, when you're developing, I think there's a thing that I always loved about wine was that if you're so close to the earth, if you're involved in the production of it, and it's like it's very I'm super passionate about that, and probably in a way, I'm glad I learned all the other things, but in a way, I probably should have stayed in the production bit of it, because I mean, I'll get weepy thinking about it. Like going up to that hill in Bien Nacido with Jim Clendenin and his like ranch guy, this guy Chewy, who I there's a funny story in all this, but like Jim goes, "Have you ever driven a four wheeler?" I'm like, "I'm from Boston, dude. I don't fucking we don't have four wheelers."
Probably not.
Yeah. And he's like, "Well, just go jump on that four wheeler, and we'll drive up to the top of the hill." And it's starting to rain, on the winery side. And so we're gonna go up and we're gonna look at it and see if we're ready for a pick. I'm like, okay. My first year in California. I mean, I've never even seen any of this stuff. So I go and jump on this four wheeler, like in the seat behind Chewy, who's like, 300-pound ranch guy. And he looked at me like, "Get the fuck." He's like, "Your four wheeler's over there." Like I was gonna ride up with him, 'cause I don't know how to drive this thing. I'm hanging on to him. And just such a piker, such a right out of Boston, man. I'm like 3 months out of Boston or something. So but we got up to the top of this hill when I eventually figured out that it has, drive and neutral and reverse like a car. And we're sitting up there and like the sun is beating down on Santa Barbara. You could see it in the distance, those orange
Mm.
tiled roofs and the white stucco and just beautiful. Like still can't believe I lived in Santa Barbara to this day. And then like there's just this storm just coming off the Pacific, and it's just starting, and you could see the clouds, and it was so awesome. And it broke me out. And, both of these guys are looking at me like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" But I had a moment. I mean, I'm
Huh.
prone to have moments. I'm very in touch with my emotions. So, but I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the process. And I think like when you start there and you go all the way through, if you approach every little bit of it like that, the name, the package, the label, where are you buying where are you getting the grapes from? If you're really planning it, and at Robert and Dobby, we always say you kind of have to work backwards. You want a
Mhm.
$200 bottle of Cabernet, you got to work backwards to get to it, because it has to come from a great place. Otherwise, you're never going to get $200. And it's like, and also all these things, the barrels make a difference. How you cellar it, what you're doing. Are you blending? You're blending to add complexity only was our strategy, our philosophy. And so, like, it's the same to me. It is all the creative process is all the same. I think making music is the same. It's, you start out with something you can't unhear in your head, this riff, the great Keith Richards has said it so many times, right? He woke up and he was dreaming of the riff for Gimme Shelter. And like, he fucking wrote the song from that. Like, how? So it is magic that comes with all of it. And I think that's the thing. I think
Yeah.
if you can be in touch with the magic in yourself, you can really do cool things.
Yeah. Well said.
Very well said. Tell us about Lloyd Cellars. Can you tell us more about the wine?
Yeah, for sure I can. So Rob Lloyd, I've known for, I want to say 20 years this year, Rob and Bonnie Lloyd. And Rob, I knew, had been a winemaker at some other great Chardonnay houses. And he was kind of like consulting winemaker for a bunch of folks. And he was involved in this other company that I later went on to work at. And as he would say, like he was leaving as I was coming in. So we didn't really get to work together much, but we'd see each other around the various wineries that we had projects at over the years. So when I had my own brand, I met Rob, and asked him a million questions about how to make that Chardonnay that he makes. And, where do I want to get Pinot grapes from? And he's just like, Rob's my age. So, he's probably like, why don't you go find out for yourself? But Rob's a bit of a wizard when it comes to winemaking, guy who started out in the tasting room and just loved it so much that he moved here and then eventually went to Davis and eventually got his master's and viticulture and enology. So, man, he's a guy who knows all the things there are to know and loves that style of Chardonnay. And I've always kind of been interested in and super interested in like how you make that big California Chardonnay without it being sort of like too stewy or you know what I mean? Like there's a process when you taste it and you're like, okay,
Mm.
that because Chardonnay can be so pretty and sometimes it's just overblown by so many other things, most generally oak. People will kill it with oak, and it's like to bring out the little nuance that's in Chardonnay, make it pretty like they do in Burgundy, I think is Rob's specialty. And so that, the Lloyd label just has two wines that we distribute. We have Chardonnay that's from Carneros, San Giacomo vineyard. And he's been dealing with those folks for, I don't know, probably longer than I've known him. I want to say it's over 20 years
Mm.
and they're just wonderful, wonderful folks. And then Pinot from Santa Rita Hills, from a little teeny tiny vineyard, up right around the same elevation as like a sea smoke. So it's higher elevation. Pinot more stressed, much darker. A lot of the Santa Barbara Pinots are very light colored. You can kind of see through them. They're more that bright red fruit. And the Lloyd Pinot Noir is much darker, more unctuous, kind of inky kind of Pinot that I like. So that's how, it's the wine we make the least of, about 800 cases a year. And I probably consume, I'm going to guess somewhere around 40 of those cases. I don't know.
Mm.
Probably, I mean, I pour it for friends too, but yeah. And then we have I hesitate to use the term second label, but it kind of is a second label. I mean, Rob would say, yeah, second label is okay, called Prescription, which is a much, much more kind of price friendly, $20 on the shelf, $17.99 if you're shopping in the right store. On the Chardonnay that's from Clarksburg, done with the great Chardonnay grower out there named James Reamer, he's kind of, I said, Rob's like a wizard. James would be like the Yoda of Clarksburg.
Mm.
Just a really cool guy and cool story. And Rob even calls him out on the label. Like, how many $17 Chardonnays do you see the grower and
Yeah.
his signature on the label? Like, we're taking that seriously. And it's Rob style Chardonnay, probably a little bit like kind of higher tone acidity maybe to it. But again, it's, it fits, it works with the other wines. And then a Cabernet that we've been making from Alexander Valley. And when COVID came along, that vineyard situation sort of fell apart, of the ownership of the vineyard. Something changed. So we went to North Coast and got some great Cabernet from Lake County and do that for a couple of years with the eventual idea to return to Alexander Valley,
Mm.
and also a pretty small production line. So
And that wine retails for around $30 if I'm correct.
yeah, the prescription cab, about 30
Yeah.
bucks. Yeah.
That's a great it's hard to find a great North Coast Cabernet Sauvignon for $30 retail these days. That's pretty
I
amazing.
know. I know. And I mean, he has incredible, I talked about taste earlier. I mean, the guy has incredible taste when it comes to winemaking. I mean, we always say like, it might not be your cup of tea, but for sure some people like it. So, if you it's like, if that's your definition of, is it good?
Yeah.
Well, some people like it. And I mean, he really, like, here's a guy who probably doesn't need to do this, but he makes all the wine. He's the guy in the cellar, and we have a cellar master, but Rob's in the cellar. He's at bottling. He does all of it. because that is his obsession. So,
Yeah.
again, like I love being around people who are passionate about stuff because I am. And so, kind of don't understand people who just sort of go punch the clock and like, yeah,
Yeah.
30 years will go by fast enough. Like, no, trust me, it doesn't go that fast.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. So perhaps alter ego would be a good way to describe Prescription Vineyards as opposed to Lloyd Cellars. I know I hate
Yeah.
the term second wine too or second label, and we always
Yeah.
struggle with that.
I know it does a disservice to that label because, like, for most folks, that probably would be enough. I mean, the label that I owned that I made the wine with my partner on, that was enough for me. Being a what would be called a second label. But yeah, it's a different expression. So he didn't even really want to make a Cabernet, but it was sort of I wouldn't say bullied into it by the rest of us. But it's like you need to have a red wine. You can't just have
Yeah.
one Chardonnay
Right.
and be out there. And so he's like, okay, I'll make a Cabernet because he was making all these great wines for Jessup and handwritten back in the day. So, I mean, I don't know how he kept it all straight or keeps it all straight, honestly,
It
and he's
always
just a cool dude.
that's even better. So I'm
It
gonna ask you
is.
to look into your crystal ball here, and, this is always difficult, but one of the big things that we all wanna know about California wine is what do you see in the future? We've got
Mm.
consumer tastes continuously evolving, climate change is always a threat. Looking ahead 10, 15, 20 years, give us some of your thoughts on what's going to happen. What's it gonna look like?
Well, I mean, if this is archived somewhere 20 years from now, I may or may not still be here or in the business. I mean, I'm
Well,
hopefully,
I hope you
I'm
are.
still making one. Hope I'm still here, but yeah. I think, I think the whole thing with like consumption levels changing and people love. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any shortage of press, but people love to talk about how the wine business is going, in a weird direction, and I just don't think so. I think too many people have microphones these days, and too many people are allowed to say these incredulous things that get press, and then all of a
Mm.
sudden, some people who might even be people who buy wine are starting to think that maybe is true. So I think it's like, I mean, we just eat up all these things so quickly, these new ideas. Like wine's been around for thousands of years. I don't see it going away because of Generation Z or whatever it is. That shows you how old I am. I don't even know which generation, right?
It's still
But
Z.
is it Z? Okay. So, I mean, my little boy is Generation Alpha, right? And he is 8. He doesn't drink wine, but he certainly has tasted it. He's tasted a little, spoonful in his glass of water, so he knows what it is. He can tell you a bunch of things about Pinot Noir because I love it. And
That's great.
I think there's just a missing developmental step in this generation. I mean, I really think so. I think that they didn't get exposed to wine the way that we did. And so, yeah, they're not naturally gravitating towards it. Also, all these other things that were illegal once that are legal now, it does take a bite out of the apple, of spirits and wine and beer. I always love the term yellow beer. Isn't that the word? It's like that's a category like, well, yellow beer is also down.
Oh,
It's like,
beer.
well, God, why wouldn't it be? Doesn't sound great when you say it that way, but I
No,
just
not
think
really.
that I think wine comes to you as you also develop your taste. Your prefrontal cortex is not developed until you're in your 20s. The first bottle of wine I ever bought, ironically or not ironically, or coincidentally or not, was a bottle of Woodbridge Cabernet because
Mhm.
we poured it in the restaurant I worked at in Boston. I had a big date and I thought, I'm going to try to impress this girl. I'm going to bring a bottle of wine. And it worked. So, hence I'm stuck in the wine business. But I just think they weren't exposed to it. So looking down the road, I think wine doesn't go away, but I do think one of the benefits of all this is the attrition that's going to come because there's just been so many brands and so much inventory and so many let's just make 400,000 cases of it. It doesn't even have to be good. We have a way to sell it. And it's like a business not by people like Jim Clendenin or Rob Lloyd. It's like people who are in it because they truly love it and they're passionate about it. Care. No, well, if you're passionate about making money, there's lots of easier ways to make money than being in the wine business. So go do
Absolutely.
that and leave the wine business for those of us who know what we're doing. you know?
Very
I
true.
I I think it'll be back, and I think that those folks, that Generation Z, when they I sort of jokingly say this, it gets me in trouble, probably more than not. I could see you guys wanna hit the dump button already, but it's like you're nodding. I love that.
No, I'm
Nodding no.
Generation X over here, so no, you're fine.
Yes. Yes, good.
Very
Yeah.
fine.
The original forgotten generation.
Yes.
That's us.
They don't give a
Um,
fuck generation, yeah.
Thank you. Yes. They don't have spouses and houses and kids yet. They don't have real problems yet. They don't have real jobs yet, most of them. If I had a kid who was God knows I'm old enough to have one of those kids. I don't, but if I had a kid who's still living here in this house, well, first of all, I wouldn't, because if they were, 18, 19 years old, get the fuck out. But second of all, like, you don't have any problems yet. So of course you're not like, you don't need to decompress at the end of the day because you're not compressed. And you
Mhm.
also are like full of crap most of the time. Like I can't, I try to stay off social media. It's impossible, by the way, as a photographer, you got to put your stuff out there. But like, God, what is going on? And it just makes me realize, like, okay, you just don't have any taste yet. That's why you don't drink wine. Like, develop some taste and then do it. Lay off of the gummies or candy, by the way. Okay. So, like, I mean, if you're going to do that, I say go old school. And I won't elaborate any further. But like, it's just like, come on. I just think that's it. I think, we've had downturns before, and I think they've been all significant and they've been based on these horrible things that have happened. And like, remember after 9/11, try to sell a $300 bottle of wine when no one's traveling and there are no expense budgets because people don't want to get on planes.
Right.
Fact. 2008, the whole bottom drops out. The banking industry, everything goes away. Same thing, no expense accounts. These folks are not buying wine because they don't have an expense account. It's because they don't have any taste yet. That's that's my get off my lawn moment, for them. Angry old man sitting out there, drink wine, you bunch of bums.
I know, it's like they didn't have to drink out of the hose in the backyard when they wanted a drink of water in the summer when your mom would put you out until the lights came on. I mean,
You are onto
you know,
something. That's
it's
what they're
it's
missing, is
the
that
truth.
chromosome.
It
Yep,
is. It is.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned a lot of bands. You mentioned Aerosmith. I'm a huge fan of the Pixies as well. My niece is actually, her middle name is Valoria after
Oh my
one of the
gosh.
songs. So yeah, big rock nerd over here. And in Pearl Jam, of course. And they all have just like this fierce following. Their audience is so loyal to them. And so, what can wine brands learn from the music communities about authenticity and longevity?
Wow. Now that, of all the podcasts I have been on recently, is the best question that I've gotten, and certainly the best question I've had about wine. Look, I think authenticity is number 1,
Mhm.
and it speaks to what we just talked about. There's so much crap on so many shelves that it's just like, all due respect to marketing people, but somebody thought of this, and then somebody was sold the idea, and then they put it in a bottle, and it's not even very good. And so you're selling, like, you could sell the image of a brand, and then what's in the bottle sucks. Happens, right? We've all experienced those things.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's wine or spirits or beer or whatever, or potato chips. Sometimes the marketing is better than the product. And I think that, like, authenticity, at least for certain types of people, has to ring true. You can almost see it, right? And I mean, a lot of things are good at sort of duping you into thinking it's authentic, and it's like, it's not. And then you find out and you're bummed and you don't go buy it again,
Right.
right? But when something's authentic and when you come up with a brand that really like, to me, I always thought, like, I'll be that and go back to the angry old man thing, but I'll be that, like, 80-year-old guy who's like hobbling into, restaurants in Los Angeles, being beeped at and, screamed at because I'm going too slow. And I'll be out there selling my wine because I made it. I think it's cool. I want to show you that I think it's cool. If you don't think it's cool, it's okay. And I think that's the attitude that you have to have. And like, no one said that you were going to be a gazillionaire by getting into the booze business. That shouldn't be why you get into it. As Rob would tell you, like, he got into the booze business for free booze. because it's like, I like drinking wine, so that's why. And I get it. I
A
mean,
good reason.
A good as
my high
reason
school
as
friends
any.
would tell you I've been in alcohol distribution since then.
Oh,
Like, yeah, I've got a case of beer. I found it in the basement. And it's like, I mean, I think that's the thing. I just think you have to be authentic. I think it all started out to be very authentic, and then when big business gets involved and God forbid Wall Street gets involved, it's like the authenticity sort of leaves. Or when somebody buys a brand that was once this very authentic thing, they're like, we've got it here. We can get in on this thing. And I won't mention names, but it's like I've seen it too many times. And then they blow it up and make it this huge thing, and then you see it gets discounted, 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 and then all of a sudden, this once authentic great thing is no longer any of those things. It just
mhm.
carries the same name. That's the biggest shame in our business. It's like, don't blow a good thing. So, but it's just hard. It's hard to hold on, and I get it. Some people
Yeah.
probably get into this and think this is my ticket, to doing nothing. And I would tell you that if I made a gazillion dollars on selling a wine brand here, Rob and I sold the brands and he
Mhm.
sliced off some dough for the kid over here, I would still do what I'm doing. I
Would you?
promise you that. Yep.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not driving a school bus. They always say, like, the guy who wins the lottery says, if I win the lottery, I go back to driving a school bus the next day. That ain't me. No
No.
way. Right. but but I would keep doing what I'm doing because I think what I'm doing is pretty cool. So, you know,
That's for sure.
Yeah, I think so
That's
too.
a nice segue too, Jeff, because you've spent more than 30 years successfully doing what you do in two demanding high pressure fields.
mm.
So what I'd really like to know is what keeps you creatively energized after decades in the wine and photography business.
Well, I mean, I always think I'm a storyteller. I think that that's the thing that keeps me coming back to both things. So you could be, with photography, we're always chasing that great moment. And I said to somebody the other day, like, I don't want to diminish any of the work that I've done documenting these bands. A huge part of my life and a huge part of a lot of our lives. But like, I've never been in a war zone,
Right.
Yeah.
taking photos
Right.
of. I've never done the
Yeah.
napalm village, little girl running down the road. I can't believe I'm forgetting the photographer's name. That's horrible. That's a sin. But it's like, I've never done that. Would I like to do that? Yeah, a big part of me would like to do that. My wife would kill me before I could get out the
Yeah.
door. Going on the tour with the rock band's a different story. But for me, it's the visual story, and it's always chasing that. What's that perfect? I mean, I have a lot of perfect moments. A lot of perfect moments in this book. A lot of perfect moments I've taken of my kids, of strangers in New York, street photography. I have to say that I have over 30 years been able to nail a few bangers. In the wine business, it's the same. I like to tell the stories, whether it's my story or whether it's somebody that I believe in story and that I'm working with them. Like, it's hard for them to do what they do without a me.
Mhm.
And so, it gets harder and harder to tell the story because, we have limited time to tell the story. So many of the stories are the same. I've said this to so many people I've worked with. It's like, what makes us different? It's your story that makes us different. A lot of people make a Carneros Chardonnay in that
Mhm.
price point. What makes us different? What's your story? Why are you doing this? And then it's like, then the great responsibility, like I was saying about photography, great responsibility to shoot that band and not take the picture sometimes. The great responsibility in what I do in the wine business is I have to go, I take it upon myself to tell that person's story. Can I do it better than they can do it themselves? Sometimes I can. I mean, literally, like, I've had times in my life where, you know, I've had people that we all know or have heard of anyway say, you tell my story better than I do.
Wow.
And it's like, I think that's the trick, right? I mean, it's not a trick though. That's authentic. That's real.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
so
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is just to strive to keep it real, not to
Mhm.
sound cheesy, but keep it real. The wine business has become sort of unreal. And I think this is a great reckoning that's happening. I think a lot of those brands will disappear. I think a lot of that inventory is going to get destroyed or shipped somewhere. I mean, it's got have to, right? It can't just sit around. That's sort of the only problem with the wine. With wine is that you're creating an aging product. Like, the minute you put it in a bottle, you've already lost time. So not everything gets better with time. So, it's just, we just have to continue to be real and tell the authentic story, tell the true story, and don't mind all the noise and all the bullshit, which is no one's drinking wine anymore. Bullshit. I go out, I'm out all the time, everywhere, all over the country, outside of the country. People are drinking wine. Trust me.
Yes, they are indeed.
They are. You just gave some really great advice. I'm gonna make my daughter listen to this episode because she's in the arts and is a
Mm.
photographer as well. So, I have to ask you, just as a true insider though, what's your favorite Pearl Jam song? But most importantly, Jeff, most
Mm.
importantly, what does it feel like when you are taking a photo of the band when they play it live and you are standing there and it is just going through your veins?
Uh,
Boy.
it's, I mean, to pick a favorite song, not possible. It's just, it is not 100% not possible. I mean, I'll go back to, I mean, was a great opener, concert opener for many years, and they still open with it sometimes. Release, which is, the first record, and
Mhm.
brings up so much dad stuff, longing, missing things, you know. That one in particular, when I hear him play that live, I go to that place, just
Mm.
like that. Yellow Ledbetter probably would be my favorite song, just kind of musically. I love it. I love the guitar in it. The lyrics are, now that I know what the lyrics are, and there's those who
Now you can
say
understand the
they're,
lyrics.
yeah, I mean, it's very hard to understand, in the studio version. And I think he changed the lyrics to that song a
Mhm.
lot. So there were never any printed lyrics to it. But Ed is the best at that. Like, you say things, I'm like, some of the, even like in speaking to him, you have a conversation with somebody, and, we talk, you think like, okay, we're just having a conversation. And like something would come out of his mouth and you're just like, what? What? Like, how does your brain even put that together to put, I mean, the
Mhm.
guy's just, he's a poet,
Right.
he's a poet who happens to work at a rock band. And so like,
Mhm.
I had a moment on stage in Boston, second night in Boston. So this is going back to September 24. And I'm on stage and I'm at Fenway Park, my, beloved Fenway Park. And the first place I ever saw them was maybe 50 yards over that green wall, at the club that I worked at. And I'm up there and I'm right next to the drum riser, and the mighty Matt Cameron is wailing away on the drums, and the house lights are up, and I can see like 100 people I know. I'm not kidding you, out in the crowd. I mean, it just all night long, I just kept
Mm.
looking up and they're out there, and I'm sitting there next to him and I started hyperventilating. I've never hyperventilated in my
Oh my
life.
god.
Wow.
Wow.
And it was they were starting the intro to Keep on Rocking in the Free World. So big
Mhm.
show closer. So it's kind of the end of the night, and I was sweating my ass off all night long, running around. And when you can't get enough like moisture in your mouth to speak, one of those nights because you're just going so fast. And I'm sitting there and I'm having this full circle moment. I'm thinking about the club and I'm thinking about that night and that show and meeting those guys, and like the fucking journey that took me from there to that moment, and just tears streaming down my face. And I can't even function, like flop sweats, like through all my
Mm.
clothes. And I look over and Matt Cameron is looking at me playing the drum still. And he like gave me are you okay? Like, like number one, I was like, I'm having this thing, and he just started laughing, and kept playing. But that was cool. And that was like one of those things, lost my dad last March,
I'm
and he was supposed to
sorry.
be, thank you. He and a long, complicated relationship, but he was supposed to be at those last shows in Pittsburgh. They would have been close for him, couldn't never made it. And the last time I spoke to him, he recited the lyrics to a song called Present Tense, which is a favorite, and it killed me. They came out and played that, started the show with it, and it completely broke me down.
My
And I was
gosh.
standing there in front of Mike on Mike's side, Mike McCready's side, and just tears streaming, and he's like looking at me like, "What is going on?" You know? And I was like, "I'm good, I'm good, I'm good," and just like, I just went through it. I mean, you just gotta go through it, you know?
Yeah.
But they just have so many, at different times in my life. I remember living in a little bachelor pad in Santa Monica. I was so excited to have my own place. I hadn't had my own place ever. And this little crummy apartment, north of Wilshire, great neighborhood, loved it. I was working for Southern and lived there with my dog. And there's a Pearl Jam called Up in My Tree.
Mhm.
And there were like these huge avocado trees that grew in this. It sounds like a lovely place now that I say that, but like, second story, and there's just avocado trees. And I literally was like up in a tree almost in this apartment, and I knew nobody in LA. And it was the very first time ever I've been in that situation where I don't know anybody at all. And I'm living in this huge city, and I was there maybe a week or two. And I remember just sitting there, listening to that song over and over again. And it gave me the resolve to
Mhm.
get off my ass and go to a bar and try to meet people, like when we used to do that.
Right? You remember those days?
Absolutely
Yeah,
amazing. We've enjoyed spending some time with you. Jeff, I would like to invite you back sometime in
love
the
to.
future. Yeah, because I feel like we could chat with you for hours and hours, and I hope to meet you in person sometime as well. But I
Yeah, we'll
just
do it.
Yeah, I wanna thank you so much for coming on Served Up, for just spending a moment and sharing your amazing stories and your grace as well with Eric and I, and with that said, man, I just wanna wish you some great health and a lot of peace. Cheers to you.
Thank you so much to both of you as well. Cheers. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.